And if you haven't heard, Congress has just passed a $2.2 trillion package, which is a lot of money. It's comparatively actually more money than was spent during World War II. So it's something that hasn't been done ever. If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson.
I'm Tunde Ogulana.
And I'm Apryl.
So we want to bring a special coverage as the corona crisis continues, and to really let you know how you can respond, how your small business can respond. If you haven't heard, Congress has just passed a $2.2 trillion package, which is a lot of money. It's comparatively actually more money than was spent during World War II. So it's something that hasn't been done ever. Of course, we haven't seen anything like the virus. So politics aside, you probably heard me rant on parts of the bill. I have a love-hate relationship with this bill. We're going to talk about the parts that I actually love. I think there are some good parts of this bill, particularly when it comes to small business, particularly at this unique moment, at this unique time in history, not only American history, but we're talking world history. The coronavirus has really stopped business in its tracks. You could have planned your entire life, your entire career. You could have done everything right, but no one plans to go from just like 100 to 0 just like that, without any type of warning, without any type of buildup, and just see all of commerce, literally, or most of commerce, shut down. So we're seeing things that we haven't seen. And so in some ways, this part of the bill is a good part of the bill, despite other parts of the bill that I hate, but I'll leave that for another podcast. So I have two experts on here that are financial planners, both people I've leaned on, I've known for a long time. Most of you know Tunde Ogulana, who's been on the show on a regular basis. Some of you do not know my friend Apryl Pope. We go way, way back, elementary way back. And so I trust both of their perspectives implicitly. And I think people need to understand the opportunities in this bill, because there are opportunities. So we're going to go through as easy as we can what you need to know, the highlights of the bill, if you should apply, how you should apply, if you're qualified to apply. So I will start. Actually, I'll start, Apryl, with you. If you're just looking at, if I'm the average business owner out here, particularly, most business owners are sole proprietors. And still people underestimate this, but I think it's like 90%. And if you talk about people of color, it's almost all business owners are solopreneurs. What are the opportunities for small businesses in general, but also for solo entrepreneurs, people that just had maybe one, two, or just maybe themselves in this bill?
I think there's quite a few things for the small business in general, but for that specific question, the first one that comes to mind is you talked about the economic injury disaster loans. So, and the grants for those. So those are designed for what you said, the solopreneurs, it could be small businesses up to 500 employees, but it's really that independent contractor, sole proprietor, the solopreneur that was getting their business going. They're doing a great job, like you said, but you can't plan for this. So it's really low interest loans. It could be up to $2 million. And those loans, that's fine. But the nice part that they added in was an additional up to $10,000 advance that you don't have to pay back. So, and that's like to help right now, help anything. It's supposed to be within 3 days of applying. So you go to SBA.gov, apply within 3 days. I don't know, I had to figure out how much you get, but it could be up to $10,000 and you don't have to pay it back. So I think that is to be able to pay for those things like our rent, people leases for copiers. I mean, all the stuff that small businesses, and when it's just you and all your sales just came to a halt, you still have responsibilities. And even as planners, I'm sure Tunde does the same, we teach, have your emergency fund, have your savings for this. But when everything stops, you blow through that real quick. And when you don't know when it's going to end, either in Ohio here, and it extended till the end of, or May 1st, our kids aren't even going to go back to school yet.
So God, that's another thing we all got to be teaching our kids too. A lot of work.
Yes, I'm like financial planner.
You got three.
Three boys at home that I'm homeschooling right now. So, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Having fun. But I think that's the main thing that comes to mind of the three things that I think are the most important for small businesses. For that loan assistance and that instant up to $10,000 cash.
Tunde, What's your thoughts here?
No, I agree with you guys. There's a lot in this package that is going to help small businesses and sole proprietors. I'm very impressed with the real nod to the small and mid-sized business community in this stimulus package. When I started doing the research for the show and really trying to get in the weeds, I was impressed with what I saw in general. Like you said, Rob, I'm sure there's definitely stuff that we can look at and frown upon, but I think the majority of it, from what I saw, look like they're doing the right thing and trying to do the right thing. I think my concern is going to be the execution of it, and not to bash anybody, whether the government entities or the businesses, but I just think because, like you guys identified, we're in crisis mode. You've got SBA, employees as well as bankers that are all working remotely too, and all dealing like we are with, probably kids at home, all that. So just, when the system is already takes some time and paperwork and all that stuff to get things done, now you're going to have millions of people coming at it that are unexpectedly, and the workers in that system are hampered from being remote and just all the stuff we're all going through. I think that everyone's got to hit the patience button and realize this probably isn't going to be the smoothest execution over the next couple of weeks to a few months. But again, I don't think there could ever be a smooth execution for, like Rob said, you go from 100 to 0 overnight, technically. So I think it's a great first step. I do think this is going to be the start of several stimulus packages. I think we're going to be well into the mid trillions, maybe 5 or 6 trillion by the time this is over. And what I read, which was very interesting, was that the bill was passed, because I think it's important to note that we're taping this show actually on the 31st of March, which is a Tuesday. The bill was passed on Friday, the 27th. So right now we've got a federal act that was passed by Congress, signed by the president, but both the SBA and the Treasury Department have said that they haven't actually finished all the final details. So I think it's going to be very important for everyone to just keep paying attention, because as much as we're going to share on the show today, we're still limited because the actual details aren't finished yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Let me just break down highlights so folks understand, and please correct me if I missed something. I'm going to give I'm not going to give advice as a financial planner or anything financial, but I will give my understanding as an attorney, having read through this. There's essentially, I try to break this down for people. There's essentially two different types of loans, two different components of the loans. We've talked about one. I'm just going to call it an EDIL loan for short, EID, economic injury disaster loan. That is the type that Apryl talked about a lot. And that is essentially, I believe, what most of the smaller businesses are likely to apply for. You might get the next one I'll talk about in a minute, but loans are up to $2 million. The term is about 30 years. It's about the interest rates are 3.75% for businesses. You can actually get this for nonprofits too. It's at 2.75% for nonprofits. The thing there are some there's some really great opportunities here too. Not only if you find yourself, from my point of view, if you find yourself as a business that is not hurting right now, you still may want to apply for this loan because A, you don't know the future. B, it still could be a good opportunity for you because these SBA loans are they're available. It's been a great program for a while, but it normally doesn't apply to many individuals. Most people are excluded from this opportunity, but this time you get an opportunity even if you're a solo entrepreneur, and you don't even have to personally guarantee, which means that you don't have to guarantee yourself to pay it back. It just goes through the business. A huge difference and a huge opportunity. You don't have to put any security up except for maybe interest in your business, which I see as a huge opportunity. At least that's for the id side, and I'll talk about the other side, which is called the Paycheck Protection. I'll just call it the PLG loan for now, which is a little different, a little more scaled, more money, but a whole bunch more strings. So we'll go down to that in a minute. I want to actually dive a little bit more into this first, into the id loans and what you should think about as a financial planner. And as financial planners, if you're advising businesses after what I just went through a little bit, yes, there's a good opportunity that you don't have to personally guarantee. Yes, you can get access to loans at a level that you didn't before. What considerations should you make, and if you should take out a loan, And if you and how much? What type of planning or thought process did you put into as a small business owner looking at this loan, particularly the EDIL loan? And we'll get to the other loan next. April.
Okay,
Start
I'll
with you.
go first.
I'll go with Tunde.
Okay. Yeah, I think one thing, like I said, yes, you don't have to guarantee it with anything. And also another part is usually for these loans, you have to prove that you can't get funding anywhere else. They've waived that as well. So they're making it easily accessible. But also there's no prepayment penalty. So let's say, like Rob, you were saying, you don't know what's going to happen. And I think depending on the type of business that you have, okay, yeah, we maybe go back to school? Probably not. So kids aren't going back to school, but right when businesses open, are they going to be running back out to your hair salon or wherever it is? If people have been, struck financially this long, they might not be coming right back to your, whatever your business was. So not knowing what that future is going to be, if you do apply for it and don't need it, you can send it back. So it's not, I've talked about this with my businesses and nonprofits. I have one business owner who was talking about thinking about it. She is a service-based business and she's doing some stuff on Zoom like this, but a lot of her contracts got shut down. And so she feels like, I don't want to take a loan because I don't want to go into debt. I don't want another bill. I don't want any of this. And I told her, I get that. Because that's what we teach. Like, we don't want to go into a bunch of debt. You don't want to have an extra bill. We don't want to do that. But I was telling her, if it's between your business closing and you taking this that's what this assistance is here for. So if you don't need it, send it back or do something else. But I wouldn't wait until June. And then you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have just had $5,000 because I've already run through everything, I could have had it. So
And the 10,000. And can I ask a question? And then Tunde follow up on this as well. My understanding is the 10,000 is the almost that's pretty much a grant. Like, so I don't see the disadvantage of applying for it if you're assuming that you're eligible for it, which you have to actually have been in business. This is why it's important. We talked about when we talk about income inequality, it's important to have a business set up, even if you don't already have employees and things. People think like, oh, I have to have employees, I have to have all these great ideas and plans. No, just start the business and then work through your plans. Tunde, what are your thoughts on it?
That's a great segue, Rob, because it gets me thinking about record keeping. And I think April pointed out something very important because debt is very psychological. And I think some people, we've all heard there's kind of good and bad debt. And I'm a big kind of proponent of being debt free. And my joke to everybody is the best retirement plan is being debt free. But April's 100% right. I mean, sometimes you need to borrow in order to survive as a business, and that's okay. Especially if you're running the business, kind of running a tight ship, and you know that you'll be able to control the payoff. Now, I think this is a unique situation for us all, around the world actually, because this isn't a normal recession. That's just a business cycle recession where you kind of can predict certain things. I was talking to my wife today actually that it's interesting because we have our youngest son has an autoimmune deficiency. So he's more susceptible to this virus, and we live here in South Florida. And so I kind of was saying I could see habits being different after, maybe this whole thing is over, so to speak, because in a normal recession, like April said, we all will go out and just kind of spend what we have again and all that and go to restaurants. And I said, until I'm 100% sure this virus is gone or there's a vaccine that works, I'm not going to be going to Disney World and being around or going to some packed restaurant with my kids because I'm just not going to take that risk. So if you multiply anybody with a potential health concern by millions, multiply that by millions, that example, I think April's right to give that caution that, if you have the hair salon or the small business over here, the car wash, whatever it is, people might not just be rushing back because this isn't just about money. This is about people's health, their concerns about certain things. So I think that's what makes this a little bit scarier and more unknown for most business owners is because we're fighting against a virus that has to run through the system, and we also got to get a vaccine.
And then we got to run through the system, and then people have to have assurances and faith that it is working. Those are two parts. You have to actually solve it, and people have to believe that it's solved, which are two different things.
Correct. And so that's why I think we should, warn everybody. I mean, I hate to be kind of somber on this with my message, but this is going to take a long time. I think at least 3 to 6 months to do just what you said, Rob, is just get an idea of how this is playing out. And then from there, it might take up to a year for us to really feel good, because that's how long it might take to have vaccines and all this stuff for us to really feel safe. So I think back to April's point about the savings and all that, everybody needs to kind of really look at their own kind of financials, their how they're living, all that. I think, and that's where I said, after reading what I read so far, the government seems to be, in this case, doing an honest way of trying to include small businesses. It isn't just a giveaway for the large corporations. Correct. And all that. They're going to get theirs for sure. But,
no, they still got the better end of the deal, but at least this one is.
But they're making sure they're not.
At least it's something. Normally, what I appreciate, Tunde, to your point, is that this did something for small business, and something I want to highlight that you both brought up that I think I have a little point of distinction on. That I think, yes, you got to be very careful with debt. Business debt is different from personal debt, though. This is the point of business. This is why we created this construct that is business that allow and because normally in these loans, for my understanding, we're just talking about the EDIL loans, and we're going to go to the PLGs later. So remember, there's two different types. I'll repeat it over again. There's the EDIL loans, that's for the economic disaster relief, and then there's what's called the paycheck loans, essentially helping to cover your workforce. This one, for the EDIL loans, my understanding is for $200,000 and below, you are not personally in debt. You don't have to guarantee that Apryl Pope has to pay this back. It's something that, people have to get comfortable with. This is a different type of debt. This is why you have a business debt, to protect you from all your personal assets going away if something doesn't go right. So I'm not telling you to take the $200,000. I'm letting you. I just think people have to know that this is not the same, because a lot of these folks, we're talking about solo entrepreneurs, these people that are that have had their own business and it's only been them or one or two or three other people. They have traditionally not gotten these SBA loans. So this is a new thing. So this is a new opportunity to at least get some influx of cash if you need it, or if you could use it to grow your business and you think because all of this is a leap of faith at some point. Like at some point, that's what business is. But if you have a business that's here, that's in existence, and you have good credit, this is another thing as part of it. Good credit's important, that you guys can speak to. But good credit's important. If you have good credit and you have a business, you can get a loan, essentially how it works now, for up to $200,000 pretty quickly, theoretically. But go ahead, Tunde. You want something to say?
Yeah, no, and just because I wanted to get back to the point I made earlier about the record keeping. Because I think part of and where I see the strength of Apryl and I to be able to help people watching now is also in some of these financial planning kind of tools and tips, because we don't have the final, like we mentioned earlier. The act is passed, but the SBA and the Treasury still haven't finalized all the details. But I think as a business owner, and Apryl, definitely hop in here to give your 2 cents. I feel like most business owners have certain strengths and weaknesses, because we're all human beings, right? We all have a psychology. We all lean towards certain things. Most of the people that get into business are usually visionary type. They want to look over the horizon. They're not the people in the weeds with the blinders on, looking at Excel spreadsheets. I mean, there are business owners that are very meticulous and detailed, but many aren't. And so I know that's one of the areas that I used to have a much greater weakness. I mean, I think it is still a weakness of mine, but as I've matured in business, I've realized I need to respect data, the details, and information. And I think what I was reading, just stuff about this package, and to Rob's point about having good credit, the fact that you need to file your taxes, all these things are things that we kind of take for granted, and a lot of business owners know they should be doing. I mean, I think everyone files their taxes eventually, but to do it timely, to have programs like QuickBooks, to not commingle your business and personal finances. When I was just reading up and preparing for the show, the amount of records they're going to be asking people for, that's when it hit me. I was thinking, one thing that I wanted to make sure we mentioned was that any entrepreneur that's not taking record keeping seriously, they might be hurt by not having good books and records during this period of time, either trying to get help, or later on when the government comes back to check, hey, did you spend all that money on payroll or not? You better show us. Because remember, that part of the loan, which I think you're going to get into next, Rob, that is supposed to be for a certain period of time, and whatever isn't spent is then either got to give back to the government, or then they turn it into a long-term loan that you're paying back
Oh,
over
yep,
time.
yep. Then you're on the hook. There's no forgiving. So we can actually move to that part. Is there any other part you wanted to talk about with the
No, I
EDIL?
just want to give up the floor to Apryl if she had any kind of just 2 cents on advice
No,
for folks
please.
like that.
No, I think you're right with the record keeping. And I think we say it's easy, but I was looking on the SBA and, it says upload your, this document, scan and upload this document and make sure your taxes and where are you finding all of this? So those that aren't, I think there's a lot of things that are going to come out of this that are going to be positive. I think it's going to be wake up calls for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So personally, our personal wealth management clients, yes, they already know. I mean, this is a huge wake up call if you hadn't had your emergency fund and you have a bunch of debt. Wake up call. But for businesses and nonprofits, when you keep saying, I'm going to get that filed, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get that all on QuickBooks, I'm going to do this. And now you want to get that loan and you're trying to apply on tomorrow and you can't upload and find all of these documents. I'm hoping that it will be a wake up call so that they, you realize you're running a business. If you look inside your business, like would you fire yourself if you were the boss? Like if you were running that, if you were somewhere else, they'd probably fire you. So you are the boss. Like if you look at your back office and you're like, whoo, you would probably fire yourself. Then it's time to, get that together and spend this time at home doing it right now.
That's a great point, Apryl. I want to throw this in here. I remember when I was younger and I was working more in corporate in the big office buildings and all that. I remember there was a guy whose desk was so messy. And I remember one of the, I was a young kid in my 20s and one of the older guys in the office, I was in this guy's office who was real messy. And one of the older guys came in and looked at him and had like a serious look. And he said to him, would you hire a guy that kept his office like that? Meaning as a financial planner. Mm-hmm. And the guy whose office I was in didn't answer. And I knew exactly what the answer was. Yeah. And that was a great learning lesson for me. But it's funny, it was a great learning lesson for me as a young kid because it makes you think, right? Like if I'm so sloppy that I wouldn't even hire myself, and I think that's what you're saying. One thing I would want to just add here is there's a book that really helped me to all the entrepreneurs out there. Really appreciate and respect kind of what we're talking about, the attention to detail. And it's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And I got no association with him or the book or the publishing company. So that's not a plug for me to make money. That's an honest plug that it was a very good book that took a guy that's kind of, always in the clouds, thinking about the next thing over here and on the horizon. That's, matured me a lot to say, you can't forget to look down and still at one foot in front of the other. So I just want to put that out there.
No, that's a good point. And to bring this all the way home. So for folks that haven't done anything with the government, I've done grants and things like that. You have to follow everything to a T, or because they look for ways to disqualify you. So if that's literally what's done, at least at the government level. So you can have a good package, right? And you think, oh, I'm being creative because I did this and that. No, give them exactly what they say within the four corners. What they say, exactly how they say it. Even no matter how dumb it sounds. I mean, this sounds like I'm being crazy, but this is exactly how, from all of my experience in working with government, don't go outside the lines. Make sure you understand what they're asking you and only give them what they're asking you.
And I was going to say real quick, they already sent a message out today that said, if you applied for the loan yesterday or 2 days ago, apply again. It says apply again. They said, because you have to check another box that says you want the $10,000, you want to be considered for the up to $10,000 advance. So people are thinking, I already applied. I know I probably don't need it. And it literally said, if you've already applied, just apply again. It won't affect anything. So you got to jump through those hoops and do what they say.
I mean, we have a friend, to your point. We were talking to Tunde and I were talking to him. We said, this loan's coming out. You should apply. He said, well, I already did. And this was like, we said, we just passed Friday. How did you apply for it? He's like,
apply again.
Text on Saturday, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was like, just I don't know.
Do it again, just in case.
So you need to do it and make sure you are following. I know this sounds like a broken record, but it is so important because you don't want to disqualify yourself for something that you're actually qualified for. So go through it, and in this podcast, we're going to give you all the reference points, where you can go, all the articles we referenced that I think outline this as easy as it can be outlined. I wouldn't say it's rocket science, but it is a science to know how to deal with these things and maneuver through them. So,
and one thing I'd like to add, Ram, before we jump, is because it reminds me here that because you talked a little bit about the SBA and the mechanics. I think that it's important for the audience to understand kind of from 30,000 feet how the whole system works. The loans and the grants aren't actually going to be given by the government. The government's not in the business of distributing money like in this way. I mean, I know they do it in other ways, but what happens is the federal government through the SBA, the Small Business Administration, one of the departments in the government, has relationships with around 2,000 lending institutions, primarily banks and credit unions around the country. So it's a good example of kind of when the private-public kind of partnership works, where the government is going to basically, like Robin mentioned, backstop the banks to guarantee. So if the entrepreneur fails to pay it back, the bank can feel secure in lending that money, kind of like Freddie and Fannie Freddie Mac, do with mortgages. So in a way, that's why I say it to Rob's point even more, like there's going to be a lot of red tape to go through because you've got different layers of institutions that all also need to check their boxes off, because those banks are going to be audited by the government at some point to make sure they didn't do.
And the banks have never had to do it like this. Generally, correct. It's more like a traditional loan when you do the SBA. It's a loan that takes a lot longer. They want to essentially do a halfway loan and a halfway grant. So we're all in new territory. Like banks don't do this. So we also have to know that, as we're going to keep repeating this it's going to be building the airplane while we're flying. It doesn't mean you should be intimidated, though. I want people to not be intimidated. Don't be intimidated. Just learn. This is why we're doing this. We're providing the materials. All the materials on here, we're not going to make any guarantees, but I believe if you follow it, it will make your life a lot easier. That's why we're going to put this out here. Our goal is to educate. Our goal is to empower, particularly if I'm talking about small Black and brown entrepreneurs. Like, we know you had significant challenges and there's some skepticism built up. But do not let this opportunity go. Like, there is opportunities to make sure that your business not only survives too, not only thrives, but like this, we don't know what's going to happen. So I do think at a minimum, we're gonna close on this. We're gonna reiterate it over and over again. You should at least go through the steps, take your time, and apply. Now it depends on which ones you want to do, or if you want to do both. So we've talked about the EDIL loans pretty extensively. I want to talk now about the Paycheck Protection Program Loan Guarantee. I'm just going to call it PLG. It's really 3 Ps, but PLG to make it easy. So
I'm glad you didn't say PPP.
No, I didn't say PPP, PLG. That's too much. So, no, but so the EDIL loans we went through, what you can get up to $2 million. This one, I think you can get up to $10 million, I think. And I think the term is 30 years, could be 4%. And there are also a lot of similar things. It can be for a smaller business that are fewer than 500. It can be for some businesses that I think are up to 1,500 employees for select businesses. But essentially, this, if I understand it correctly, this purpose is to really help to make sure that you maintain your employees, particularly if you want to get it, if you want it forgiven. You have to have proof of of your payroll, which goes back to Tunde's earlier point, for a certain period of time, when you started the loan to when the loan ended. And then some of it, a lot of it can be forgiven if you spent it on payroll and a few other things, but particularly payroll is one of the biggest things. But if you don't spend it on these things, right, and you're going to have a traditional loan, some of which you can actually have that you would have to personally guarantee. So this one's a little different. I would say more money, more strings. But I'll start with Tunde to get kind of your impressions of this part of the PLG loan. We'll call it. What would you say are the opportunities here that are a little different from the EDIL loan?
I'll start with saying these are the times when I really regret not having a real close friend that owns a bank, because I could have had a fun time retiring off of this loan. No, I think, but on a serious note, I think it's it's another interesting move that I think is going to be needed by many businesses. I mean, this is, like you said, Rob, we went from 100 to 0. This is unprecedented in terms of, and it goes back to April's earlier point about, people have, you said something about leasing a copier, April. People don't realize when you own a business how much all that stuff costs. And depending on how big your business is, right? I mean, if you own, or not own, but you might rent, 10,000 square feet in some office building in a downtown, and you've got X amount of printers, copiers, all that stuff. You've got mail, you got it, so you might be spending $40,000, $50,000 a month just on that stuff. And then you got payroll on top of it. So I think that again, it's another good example of how they tried to address just all these issues at once in a very quick, way. So I think, again, let's see what the details all shake out to. But I generally feel good about what I saw. One of the other things I feel good because I'm thinking about obviously the big number of 10 million maximum, but I saw that sole proprietors and even 1099 contractors are also fully eligible, which I thought was great because I think there were, again, with record keeping and all that, some people aren't that good at it. Maybe they didn't get incorporated properly and they don't have an LLC or an S Corp set up. Maybe they're not being perfect about, having money go on the top of the company and then paying themselves personally. They might literally be getting just 1099 income and just spending it on their family and their personal life and their mortgage and all that. So I believe what I saw was as long as you have your 1099s from 2019, they'll use those in lieu of, let's say, a payroll for yourself if you're an entrepreneur, and they'll go up to $100,000. So if you figure 2.5 times payroll or 2.5 months worth of payroll will be $8,500 if you or $8,300 a month roughly on 100,000 times 2.5. So even somebody with terrible records and all that stuff is eligible for at least that. So again, it for at least the next few weeks to few months. And again, this is my only concern is I know that, like April said, business owners need this now. Like in the next week, they're going to start, and just if this takes 2 months to get to people's hands, we'll already see the layoffs and all that happen. Yeah. And it'll be, so again, it's and that's not, I'm not blaming anybody because I think that's.
Yeah, I had a whole nother show before this taping about how other systems do it. So no need, I did it for you.
Yeah. And I'm just making a point that it's, but this is the real life stuff, right? I mean, it's not to blame the government. It's not to blame the business owners. It's just, you got millions of people hitting the system at once. Just like the hospitals are all messed up in New York because you got tens of thousands of people they didn't expect showing up. So I think that's where everybody's just going to have a little patience, and let's see how it works out. I mean, it's unpredictable at this point.
Yep, April.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think one thing to make sure people understand payroll, well, payroll is more than just salaries. That's your healthcare benefits that you have to pay for people. This includes, even in this act, retirement benefits, sick leave, family leave, all of these things that you pay for your employees. They're counting that. So it could be a big expense. Healthcare alone is super expensive.
It is really expensive.
And so when you add all of that up, that's why this has to be a lot more money because just even if you have 5 or 10 people on your payroll and you're paying for all of that, and that is all included in that. So that's payments for vacation. I was looking at the specifics, medical, sick leave, all kind insurance premiums, retirement benefits. I mean, I'm a 401k advisor and 403b advisor. And so a lot of my companies, and nonprofits more specifically, they have a match. They have a match and they want to fully fund their retirement accounts or help fund their retirement accounts for their employees. And that was in the budget. Well, if things just stopped or big, huge fundraisers in the nonprofit world, it's fundraisers that do everything. They make several $100,000 in a night. Well, all of those have been canceled, right? Yep. And so you were planning on, you had a big bill where you're going to put, it didn't hurt you to match your employees 3, 4, or 5%, put whatever you want into it. Well, that's a payroll thing. So keeping that in mind, that it's more than just the salaries, it's also covering all those benefits that payroll really, think of like whatever payroll system you use, all those boxes you look in, or even your own pay stub, all those little boxes and all those little numbers.
Yep.
All that is considered payroll, and that's what they're helping with. So I think that is nice.
And so as I read it, just the attorney in me, it looks like it can cover a lot of things for business: electricity, gas, water, transportation, telephone, internet access for services, which began before February 15 of 2020. But this is what we want to say. There's a payroll exception, and then there's an exception to the payroll exception. So I just want to tell people it's not as hard as it sounds, but there's 2 different levels. Essentially, let's just keep it bottom line. You have to essentially keep the same average amount of employees for the first 8-week period when you started the loan. That is necessary for you to do, and you can have an additional penalty if you cut the compensation of any of your employees that make under $100,000. So that's the basic rule. So essentially, you can get all these things, and a lot of them forgiven for a huge amount of money. the big trick is that it has to be on your payroll. And just to make sure people understand that, because there's a lot of small business owners that have people that work for them, but they're not their employees, right? They're independent contractors, which I don't think this counts towards. So this doesn't. So that is something people need to understand, that just because you have someone that seemingly seems like an employee, the person actually has to be an employee, not an independent contractor. If I'm wrong on that, please let me know.
No, I don't. I think if it's, I think that you're right from the legal standpoint that if I, like, say, I have my business, and then Rob, I hired you as a contractor, as an attorney, let's say, to help me with securities law, then technically you're not my employee. So yeah, if I said, Rob, I can't pay you anymore, so the doors are shut, things slow down, that's just, yeah, you're right, you got to eat it. The reason why it made me think, because I was on a webinar today that was very interesting and informative, and they got into the idea of PEOs. And so PEOs are organizations that many small businesses may have heard of or use. So the two biggest ones in the country are ADP and Paychex. Mm-hmm. And they're basically like outsourced HR departments. Right. And they can give you employees, they can give you 401k plans, operations manuals, all that kind of stuff. And so the question came up from someone on the webinar about that. If your employees, if you have a PEO through your employees, how does that work? And they basically said it's on your form 941, the IRS form, and basically that'll tell you if your employees are your employees or if they're employees of the PEO that might be just kind of being hired out to you. And so what they said was, if they're PEO employees, then the PEO is the one that's got to go to the government and deal with it. So what I could see, though, is some lack of understanding from maybe even the employee class, because if you're showing up at one office every day for work, and depending on what your paycheck says, because it might actually, everything gets white labeled these days. So your paycheck might, say it's coming from the company that you're going in that office for every day. But really behind the scenes, you might actually be the employee, like Paychex is paying your salary in a sense.
Right, like a temp service, essentially.
They're charging a revenue share or something from the business.
Yeah, like a temp service that
So I think, that's why I wanted to bring that up is just, again, everyone's got to be careful with those little nuances.
Because you can still get the cost covered. Here's what I want people to know. Like, you can get some costs covered, but like the loan is covered. I think the loan covers basically 2.5 times your payroll amount.
So you might.
So like if you don't have any payroll.
Correct.
This is not the loan for you.
Employees, but you better go.
This is not the loan for you. That would be the EDIL. You could go back to the EDIL loan. That's what people need to know, the difference between these two.
Correct.
And why it's so important. So the EDIL loan would be an opportunity for you, because that's not solely dependent upon your payroll. And your payroll, like I said, it has to be somebody working for you. And if it's somebody working for you, you're subject to all the labor laws and things like that too. So let me just bring up that point very quickly. So like if you're not paying your people accordingly, you're not paying them, minimum wage, or you're not paying them enough in order to meet all the Fair Standard Acts, which is why a lot of new businesses don't do this, because there's a lot for them to do immediately. If you're not doing all that and then you try to take this out, you're opening yourself to a whole can of worms. So that's why I said there's more money in this paycheck loan, but there's a whole lot more strings, and you should be very, very, very cognizant of what these strings are, and careful if you really want to apply for this one. That's my view of it, just as an attorney. But is there any other thoughts about this loan and what people need to look at? And then after that, I want to look at if you can go after both, and then just overall takeaways. So any final thoughts with the PLG loans about what businesses should look at and really how they should assess?
Not really. I mean, I think we covered it pretty well. One thing that I want to mention that's another part of it is the debt relief for if you do already have an SBA loan, or like one of those micro loans. They did have some language that they wrote in there where it's really designated to provide immediate relief. So if you had those loans and now you can't afford them, you can't afford the payments, you were doing fine and you just gotten all set up and you know how long it takes to get your SBA loan, they're covering that for up to 6 months for the fees and the expenses and the interest and payment and things. So that's just one other thing to think about, where there is a little bit of relief there. And that even extends for people who get a loan between, I think when they sign, the bill was signed
Yeah.
into law and 6 months past that. So just keeping that in mind, there is that small business debt relief as a part of it as well.
Okay. No, so, final thoughts, like as we think about the bill and wrap it up. So, can you apply for both loans? The answer to that, I'll just say from legal standpoint, is yes. However, you got to make sure that, again, I'd be very careful. Just as a general matter, I'd probably hire an attorney and an accountant to make sure that you don't cross pollinate. So you basically can't cover the same costs with the loan. So you can't try to say, oh, I have this cost and I also covered it both loans. You do that, it'll get you in trouble, or maybe you'll get yourself disqualified from both loans. So don't do that. This is why you want to be careful and cognizant of what you're doing. If you qualify, we went over this. Do you qualify? Generally, this is how you're going to qualify. You still have to have some basics, some of the foundation. You need to have, as Tunde said, you need to make sure your taxes were turned in on time before. If you weren't compliant with your taxes, you're probably not going to be able to get this. If you owe child support, you probably won't get it either. So there are things, and your business has to be in existence. This is why we talk about having businesses, owning businesses, starting your side hustle, no matter what. Because you're not eligible. If you didn't have a business started by January, you're not eligible for any of this stuff. So you can't just say, "Oh, I want to create a new business and look, I have opportunities now." None of that. You can't do that. You can't go backwards. And then I think for the Tunde mentioned this, having relationships. Hopefully, you have relationships with your bankers. This is where it matters because it's money coming from quote unquote the government, but it doesn't. You're not gonna deal with the government. You're gonna deal with your financial institution.
It's not their money. It's not the government's money. They're
No.
just 100% backing it.
Correct. So you're going to have a relationship. So when you talk about qualifying, if you have good credit and if you have any type of relationship with your bank, you can qualify for one of these loans. And I think we're all saying you should at least at the EDIL loan look at the $10,000, which is essentially a grant if you qualify, and then the $200,000 with the EDIL loan. If you have good personal credit, you pretty much apply. You can pretty much have the availability to have that $200,000. Doesn't mean you should take it. But should you apply for it? Absolutely. And then see what you need and assess going forward. This is a unique opportunity and a unique time, and the system is probably going to be overwhelmed. So I would do it sooner rather than later. Any other thoughts about folks as we kind of just wrap up and have our final thoughts? And we want to do this, and I think we've had a great discussion. I think we want to actually try to have a live session or something like that to allow people to ask questions live, at least to us, because I think this will be very informative, and this won't be a one-time off, because I think more questions are going to come. It just started, as Tunde said. There, more revelations are going to come, and we're going to try to give you the information. Any other final thoughts for the audience before we close?
I have one.
Okay.
Because on this webinar, I just want to share this. It was very interesting because it was tailored towards actually Apryl folks in our business.
Okay.
Just telling because we have so many 1099 folks and all that. So they were saying that if you have, like, let's say you acquired a business, in recent period of time where you're still paying off, let's say, an installment note, that and I don't remember now, forgive me, the detail of which loan would qualify. So definitely one would have to go research that. But they said that paying the interest and the principal payments and interest payments on that buyout would actually be qualified under this because it's seen as continuing the flow of your business. So again, if Apryl bought in my practice, 2 years ago, and let's say we had a 3 to 5 year, just soft landing where she's paying me over that time. Now, if she applied and got one of those two loans, that's where my memory is foggy. That payment stream to me would be considered eligible. So that's great to know. And then the other, and the other is, it's just, I just want to share with the audience, that a lot of this comes down to our psychology, how we deal with this moment. So I think, it's definitely try and stay glass half full. And what I've been doing is trying to be very proactive and aggressive. And I was talking to my team and dealing with some consultants I know that are they're in the business of brokering wealth management practices and buying and selling RIAs and broker dealers. So my thought is, in this moment, I want to use this moment to grow my business. There's going to be a lot of people that are in our business that are older, that are getting tired of this. Maybe this is the last time they want to deal with a crash and all that. maybe their practices fall into a place where maybe I don't buy them out, but it makes sense for them to team up, and over time we can kind of take over their book of business. So, I think a lot of this, none of us expected this. Like Rob said, we all went from 100 to 0 altogether at once. But I think at this point, we're here. We got to pick ourselves up by our bootstrap and get moving. So that's my 2 cents, and I wish everyone the best in this time, and hope to see you again.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have to stay positive. I think there's a lot that's going to come good out of all of this. And I think the way we talk about with our personal clients with financial planning, when the crisis hits, just take care of your four walls, right? Make sure you have your food, your shelter, your clothing, make sure your health, make sure you're taking care of that. And so if that is going to be affected, if your business is affected, the four walls of your business are affected, that's what this is for. Don't feel bad about it. Don't, think about it, any of that. I think that's really, really important to just understand you need to take care of your four walls and staying positive. I mean, all the cool things that have happened, I think just being at home and staying at home. Yes, teaching third and fourth grade math, a little bit challenging. And I'm a math teacher, like I used to be. I'm like,
teaching it to your own kid is another thing.
Yes,
though.
I'm like, I have a master's in mathematics and I am struggling with third grade math. But I think everybody in our neighborhood is walking every single day and out and playing with their kids. I've seen 2 kids learn how to ride bikes this week in our neighborhood that didn't know how to ride bikes because their parents were working 80 hours a week. And so they never were able to teach them. And now they are. So there is really good stuff that's coming out of this, just the family time, the time to work in your business also. So I think taking this time while you're not out networking and going to events and stuff, this is when you can be getting your business in order. And getting your house in order. So take care of your four walls. Make sure you have things to cover, just like you would think of your house, your financial house that you have inside of your own personal life. Think about that for your business and just make sure you take care of that. And if you do get the loans, put it in a bank, put it in the savings account, just let it sit there, and you might not need it, and you can send it right back.
All right. Tunde, I know you want to say something.
I had one more, and thank you, because I think it's important. I got my first text today from somebody somewhere, scam artist, about this act, about, call this number and for a fee, we'll do this. So I want to really say this. The SBA program is of no cost. So if anyone's trying to charge you for this, it's a scam. The legitimate banks don't charge for this because they're making the interest. And so be very careful. This will be the time of the scam artist in this stuff, just in this period of time where some people are desperate and are going to do certain things to make money. And then the other thing is there's a lot of information out there. We've tried to share enough, but like we said, it's not even all finalized yet. So I think that the best resources will be the actual government themselves. So I would say SBA.gov.
Yep, all that'll be up.
Yep, the treasury.gov and then whitehouse.gov. I mean, just go straight to the source. If you have questions, if you're hearing stuff from people, your friends and other, just go right back to those websites because there's going to be a lot of misinformation, some of it malicious on purpose, some of it just people misunderstanding and then spreading that. But that's what I want to say to the audience. Just go to the source on this one. The government wrote it, go to their websites.
Yep, nope, I agree. And we'll have all that up. We'll have other ways to help you navigate it. But until next time, I'm Rob Richardson.
I'm Tunde Ogulana.
And I'm Apryl Pope.
We'll see you next time.